Hey, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host, your guide, your outfitter on this trip into the uplands. Yeah, every species, every dog breed, all the bad shots, that's my job. Hope you will enjoy this episode. We're talking with Talmage Smedly. T's Doghouse is the name of his operation. He's a breeder, trainer, bird hunter. You might recognize the last name. His son is now associated with Gun Dog magazine, and Talmage also writes for that organization. We'll be learning a little bit about everything in that world from Talmage Smedly. We'll also be learning from Keith Friel. Keith is just a plain old listener with a great idea, so stick around for that. And in our Handle It segment this week, a plea from me that could save your dog's life. It's all made possible by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TrulockChokes Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food. Well, constantly this time of year, trying to keep weight on flick. I mentioned a while back that opening weekend, he lost 3 pounds. Well, you know how that goes. I don't feed in the morning of a hunt. And then they burn so many calories. And he hunted 4 days in a row that weekend. It's working. Yeah, it's going to go up. It's going to go down every day of a hunt. And every day after a hunt, I'm trying to put it back. I'm using that great product from Elements Nutrition called Gainer. It's a powder. You sprinkle it on the food and it's basically fat, and it works. And a little bit more Pro Plan Sport dog food in that ration in the evenings during hunts, and then even a little bit more, just a quarter or half cup more each time I feed him in the morning and the evening when he's not hunting. Those things seem to be working, and I'm grateful for that. If you're interested in more information on that stuff, just drop me a note. Gainer is the powder, and of course, Pro Plan Sport dog food you know all about. At least I hope so. That's what we're doing. What's Keith Friel doing? Keith is listening carefully, and I appreciate that, Keith. Thanks a lot. He says, I noticed one thing you didn't mention in your recent podcast on hunting with 2 dogs. And in the past, you've talked about an older dog learning to hunt towards you and to play the wind. Yeah, that's a good one, and it works. Well, Keith says 2 dogs that have worked together for years also learn to work together in some other ways, much beyond just honoring each other's points. Keith suggests something that I really like, and we talked about this with a little bit with Tim Linehan on the last podcast. His 2 dogs have learned to quarter and pinch birds between them. Yeah, I wish there was a way to train that. And, we've talked with all sorts of folks over the years who claim their dogs have learned to circle around and get in front of a running pheasant, for example. 2 dogs together might figure it out twice as fast. And don't you love that? And then, of course, when they're pinching birds between them, that cuts off yet another escape route. So you have a better chance of seeing a bird fly instead of run away. So, Keith, thanks for bringing that to our attention. Yeah, if there was a way to train that, maybe give it some thought. Let's think about that all together, and maybe we can come up with a strategy there. Thanks a lot, Keith. Keith's tip and my status report brought to you by PointerShotguns.com. Yeah, they are excited. Even this time of year, they are receiving shipments every week, and they are getting those into the pipeline ASAP, especially sub-gauge guns. So if you're looking for a sub-gauge to kind of augment your hunting, improve it, change it, make it more interesting and fun, go to PointerShotguns.com, start shopping around, whether it's a semi-auto, an over and under, or a side-by-side, any finish, any color in Cerakote. It's all there, and it's all available right now. PointerShotguns.com. And speaking of available, I talk a lot about this because it's so important. At MidwayUSA.com, customer service is their number one goal. Sign up for their emails or text messaging and you'll get a 10% discount on your next order. Whether it's for ammo this time of year, yeah, I just placed another order because I'm going through it so fast, and that's a good thing. Camping gear, and of course, a constantly growing assortment of dog and bird hunting gear. Just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors at MidwayUSA.com. Well, so looking forward to kind of being taken to school, if you will, and hopefully you'll learn something as well from Talmage Smedly. Talmage is a bird dog trainer, breeder, bird hunter, and also the father of Tanner Smedly, who you might recognize from Gun Dog magazine. Well, Talmage also writes for that organization, as do I, of course, and got a lot to say when it comes to bird dogs and bird dog training. So, Talmage Smedly, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be a part of it.
When we first talked, you were just coming back from a hunt. It was a waterfowl hunt, but take us to the blind with you and tell us how that went.
That was a fabulous hunt. We had a good friend of mine that took us out on the hunt, and he was doing the calling. It was his decoy spread and his blinds and all of that. He doesn't guide for a living. He's just very passionate. But we had a great time. The idea of the hunt was, what's in your backyard, and he took us to a place that is within an hour and 45 minutes of our home, and not known as a waterfowl place. And when you look around, the backdrop and everything around you doesn't make you think of a waterfowl place. But we had 3 days of limits and wonderful shooting, and it was a great time. Had a good time.
It's funny you say it doesn't look like a waterfowling place. I live, maybe like you, I live on the high desert, and the birds got to stop somewhere every night.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Describe the place you were and why it was so different than what we might consider classic habitat.
Well, it's actually an area that's known a lot more for its sage grouse.
Yeah.
A lot of sage hills, but there's a small river that runs down through it, and it creates enough habitat, enough water to attract the waterfowl. And then it's got, we were sitting. Primarily, we hunted one day on a slough area, and the other 2 days, though, we were hunting in grain pivots, large grain fields. And
okay.
So it supplies food and a little bit of water, and the geese and the ducks. Mostly, what we were hunting were resident birds, and
sure.
But there's enough water there that it attracts them. Though it's just a little strip through a very dry area.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was
I'll be out with the dog in the backyard overlooking sagebrush and juniper trees. And here will come a lonely, single Canada goose flying at treetop level over the desert. And I'm always struck by that. But they find something in both locations, wherever they are and wherever they're going. And good. Well, I'm glad you had a good time. I'm a little jealous. I haven't done any of that for a while, but I'm staying out of trouble in the Checker Hills. Tell me about your organization and what you're basically doing most days, most of the time.
Well, I split my time actually. Half a day or a little bit more I spend with the dogs, another half a day I spend with the horses. They're both my big passions, and it's been an important thing for me to keep them both part of my life, even though it makes things pretty challenging because it is running in two different directions in a lot of ways, with traveling to horse shows and then field trials and hunting and, all the different things. It can be challenging time-wise, but I love it all, and I guess it feeds my passion. So I stay involved in both of them.
You've heard it before and you'll hear it again. You're not the first dog trainer who's taken stuff he's learned from horse training and transferred it over, or vice versa. And The most notable of those is Delmar Smith, but there are many others out there who have learned to think like a horse and then transferred that over to thinking like a dog. What do you think you've learned from horses that maybe does exactly that when it comes to dog training?
Really, I think they're very similar. We use different communication tools, if you will, between the two animals, but the minds work the same. In my mind, the minds of the dog, the horses, and the people work very, very similar. We're all trying to find ways to gain what we want and to avoid what we don't want, and so we move away from things that create pressures we don't like and towards things that give us the rewards that we do like. And, that, so training them doesn't feel different to me, though. Like I said, the way we communicate is different. The way the minds work and they make their decisions isn't, in my mind. Now, I know there's been some well-known clinicians in the horse world that talked about dogs and horses being far different because one's a prey animal and one's a predator. And that, of course, is true, that one is a prey animal and one is a predator. So there are different ways they might look at situations. But when you strip down all of that and you just get down to the way they make their decisions, I find them to be very, very similar. Probably the thing that, the two things that I took from the horse industry and added into the dog industry, when I was, 19 or, I guess 21, I had to kind of make the decision. I felt like what I was going to make my living at. And at that time, I thought, well, my greatest passion is the dog, so I don't want to poison that experience with the needs to make a living. So I chose to make my living on horseback while I had the dog stay as a very, very strong hobby. So, I've had dogs since I was, I think I bought my first one my first bird dog when I was 12. And so I've had them ever since then. But in the horses, so much of what we do is through touch, right? We communicate a lot through touch of the reins, touch of our legs, touch of our hands. And so I've taken that into the dogs, and I do a lot, especially with young dogs, on lead and creating communication through that lead and communication through my touch. And then, of course, we all use touch when we put an electric collar on our dogs, right? And I think for the most part we use it far more harshly than what the dog needs. I don't think it needs to be harsh, and I think it surprised me when I realized that I could collar condition every dog that I've ever trained. And I've trained a lot of breeds because I work a lot with family dogs also, and so I've had the bully breeds and I've had the the shepherds, and I've trained about every breed of dog I think that there is. And I was surprised to realize that with a dog trick collar, I could always collar condition a dog below 10. And from what I can tell, just putting, the collar on my own neck and using it, a 10 on a dog trick collar seems to me to be lower than a 1 on a Garmin. So I believe that we can collar condition our dogs lower than most collars even will go. So that touch, that through the touch, I think to me way lighter than what we realize.
Yeah,
and that I've taken from the horses. That's how the horses are. Is they are a very sensitive animal, and the communication that we can have with them through the light touch of a leather strap across their neck, right? A rein touching their neck, or our legs starting to move just down along their side or pressing against their side, and they feel that. They feel the change of our seat, the change of our rhythm of riding. They feel so much light. And in the event that I compete in, the reining, that is the key, is willingly guided, and we're trying to guide them as light as possible, and even where other people wouldn't perceive that we are changing anything, but we're getting a change in the horse,
Well, yeah, I get it. I was in the rodeo business for a while, and I'm amazed at people who could do what you do on a horse, for example. And you used the term several times, and I want you to touch on this in a little bit more detail. If we're using the collar as a light touch,
yeah,
what is it exactly doing? I describe it one way, but I want to hear how you describe it. You're not talking about shocking a dog.
right.
What are you?
I'm talking about communicating. And when you think of the collar, if you think of the technology that we have now in collars, they're much more like a tinge unit than sticking your finger in the light socket, right? If you put the collar on your neck and you touch that at the low levels, you can do that and still talk without it changing your voice. You can do that without wincing, without dropping the collar or jumping, or, you just feel it. And if you, depending on the product, and the technology, because they're not all e-collars are definitely not all equal.
Yeah.
And so some are much friendlier, if you will, than other ones. And so, but if you think of that and you're just giving a cue, or you're just giving some communication that the dog can read and guide the dog's mind to whatever it is that you're trying to say to it or communicate to it. If we think of the e-collar in that way rather than in a form of punishment, then I think we get a lot more out of our dogs, and I think our dogs enjoy the experience better. and it changes the relationship with the e-collar. And we recognize that just with the way people talk. I got to shock that dog.
Yeah.
And they're thinking of it as a reprimand. They're thinking of it as a wake-up call or as an attention giver. But it can be like, if we break things down into the ways the dog receives information from its environment. It smells things, of course, but it feels things and it sees things and it hears things. And those are the main ways we are communicating, is with what it feels, what it hears, and what it sees. And so if we say we've changed our direction and we want our dog to swing with us, we can reach out. And if that dog hasn't noticed we've changed direction, then we can make a noise, and that can get the dog's attention so that it looks up and says, "Oh, wait, hey, look, that guy changed directions. I better move to the front." Or we could reach out with a vibrate, and that might if we've worked with the dog and it knows that means to look to us, then a vibrate, and it might look up and say, "Oh, why did you just communicate with me?" And then it sees we changed directions, and it used its visual and it used feel, and it changes and goes to the front, and we didn't have to say anything, right? I think the thing that people overlook is that I can communicate through the electrical stimulation at a lighter level than I can communicate with the vibrate, and maybe even a less bothersome level than I can communicate with the tone, depending on what your dog thinks about the tone. And
Sure.
I found when I collar condition, often I can get a much better response, positive response with the puppy or a young dog to electrical stimulation than I can to the vibrate. Often the vibrate scares the bejeebies out of the dog for the first little bit. They feel that and they're like, "Whoa, is that a bee getting me? What is getting me?" And it's a very worrisome thing. And I don't get that same reaction on really low levels of stimulation. So that's why I say, we get mixed up about that as humans all the time.
Oh,
we
yeah,
think,
we do.
Vibrate's way nicer than electrical stimulation, but that all depends on the level of the electrical stimulation. And at those really light levels, I feel like I can, like, for instance, I guess this will be a plug for Dogtra, and I'm not sponsored by Dogtra, so it's a plug that's simply because it's exactly what I've found to be true.
Oh, and
but
by the way, I'll call them right after this.
Yeah. But the Dogtra products, you can dial that level down to where it's not felt. And then if you dial it up, it's a little tingle. It's a very light feeling, and then it gets stronger, much like a tinge unit. If you're familiar with the medical units used in rehabilitation and stuff. And as you turn it up, it interrupts the nervous system more and more and more, so it can get more and more uncomfortable. But at those real light levels, it's much lighter than a leash pulling on a collar.
Yeah.
And so we really can do a lot at those real light levels of communicating with our dog that I think we overlook. And I think I went into that and really experimented with that because of the experience that I've had with horses and realizing just how light you really can send signals with the horse, and the dogs the same way. They'll perceive those things. That's how that was the first thing. Well, scent and feel or touch were the first two ways that they received any information from the environment when they were born.
Sure.
Right? Mothers could guide them with the nose, and they could feel their environment and find their way around that, the whelping box, and they could smell, but they couldn't hear or see anything. And then they could see before they could ever hear. So when we're talking about communicating with our dogs, I think it's important that we realize that they go to those other things first. Their nose tells them things, and their eyes tell them things before their ears tell them things. And the feeling, the things that they feel, tell them things before their ears tell them things.
Yeah, and in fact, you probably know as well as I, and maybe you do it if you have foals every once in a while. First thing you're doing is getting down there in the stall with the foal, and touch, and obviously you're being smelled by that foal as well. Do you do the
and
same?
If you watch a foal when it stands up and goes to nurse, and mom reaches around there, and those good mothers, they reach around there and take that foal and stick it right back there where it's going to find milk. They know how to use that nose, and then that's how they communicate with that foal going forward. You'll see them pushing and using that nose, and then pretty soon their body position starts to guide the foal, and they don't even have to touch, because the foal has just learned to read the movement of the mother, and visually is picking up on things before she even has to touch the foal.
Wow.
And she'll reach in there and touch it if she needs to. Yeah, it's a perfect example. And we get in there when they're babies, and when they're first born, and you can help desensitize them to that touch. So it's not a scary thing, but it's a familiar thing that they can learn to listen to. And that's exactly what I think we should be thinking when we collar condition the dog, is that we're helping that dog become something that's very unfamiliar, become familiar, and then the dog just start to learn what that is communicating to it.
Got it. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. You're Talmage Smedly. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. If you want more information on what he does and how he does it, go to tsdoghouse.com. TS is how it looks when you type it, tsdoghouse.com. Talmage, you've talked a lot about collar conditioning, and a lot of people say, oh, yeah, we should do that. I should do that next time, whatever it is. Well, give us a short course on what you mean by that and how we do it.
Yeah. So if I'm going to use the electronic collar, to communicate with my dog, the first thing I need to do is get it familiar with it, and then I get the opportunity to create its opinion of it. So that's collar conditioning. Is I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce the sensation to my dog, and then tell my dog what to think about that sensation. So when I'm collar conditioning, I put the collar on the dog's neck, and I turn to a very low level. I always collar condition with the Dogtra product. I have also used Mini Educator, and I think that they also make a fantastic product. And the reason I like those two products is they adjust very, very low. And, they're on a scale from, like, the Mini Educators from a 1 to 100, and the Dogtra's generally from 1 to 127. And so it's very, very little increments that we can make adjustments. So just like in your house, you might be comfortable at 72, you're hot at 75, you're cold at 68, and in between there's different adjustments. And that's how the e-collar is. And we want to be able to be in an area that is very that is not upsetting to your dog. And then I just set it. I generally will just go like on my Dogtra. I've done enough of them that I'll generally start at about 8. Some of them I'll notice that I'll want to turn down to 6, and some of them I'll turn up. But I've never had to go above 10. Wow. Every dog that I've ever done is feeling it at 10. But when I start it, what I do. Sorry, I just switched off my truck to my earpiece. So you can hear me now still.
Oh yeah, we're still good.
Okay. So I'll put the collar on their neck, and then I set it down low, like I was saying, at about an 8, and I'll press that. And while I'm holding the button, I'll call them to me, which I've already taught them to come to me, and I've already taught them to come to me to get a treat, right? So then I'll push that button, and then I'll call them to me. If I need to use a checkcord a little bit to direct them to me, I'll do that. And when they get to me, I'll reward them. And I'm just teaching them that sensation they just felt on their neck means come and get their reward. I'll even just sit there and I'll press it and then I'll just give him a piece of food, and then I'll sit there a little while, and then I'll press it again, and I'll just give him a piece of food. And what I'm trying to create in that dog's mind is that when it feels that sensation on its neck, it should look to me to get a reward or a piece of food. And I'll continue to develop that until I can press it. I might be in the room and it's laying down over on its bed and watching TV or something, and I'll press that, and the dog will stand up and come over to me expecting a treat. And then I know that dog has realized that is a call to the party, if you will, that sensation is calling it to something that I'm going to provide for it that's good. Okay. And that's conditioning the sensation. Obviously, we're at levels that are lower than what would be considered, aversive. Yeah. Right. They're very punishment.
Yeah. Correct. Well, yep. So I'm the kid in the front of the class waving his hand at the teacher now. Yeah. Okay. So I get that. So the dog understands. I get a cue. I come to the boss. Hey, and then I get a reward. Yeah. It looks to me like the challenge becomes, okay, in the field, I don't always want my dog to come to me when I use the collar, or do I? So tell me how you transfer that.
Yeah, I build the base or the foundation of everything on the collar, on the neck, means come to me. Yeah. I want the beep to come to me. I want the vibrate to come to me. I want the sensation from stimulation to mean come to me. All right. Now, and I want to, at the beginning, I have it all mean come all the way into me. I transfer, and my rewards become birds, right? So when I'm working with a puppy, I'll get to where I'm pushing that button, and he turns and looks to me, and I'll call him on in. And when he gets in, I'll throw a pigeon and let him chase it. And pretty soon he's coming in and saying, where's that bird I can chase, right? So we change the rewards, but I always want that to say, come to me. And then when I'm out working, if I say I want to transfer and I want to say a beep means change direction and go to the front. Right. So I might be using the beep to turn the dog. Okay. So if I want to do that, I'm going to press the beep. The dog's going to turn to come to me, but now I'm going to direct it to where I want it to go. So I'll take what was a return to me, because that's how I've created the connection to me. Mm-hmm. So when I press that dog's going to turn and get both eyes on me, head my direction. But I don't have to let him finish that move to me. I can then direct him forward to where he would find a bird, or to where, right? So I begin with always returning to me, but then I will change depending on how I want to use that communication. But really, in my mind, I'm also teaching my puppy to go to the front. So the direction I'm walking, the puppy knows that it should try to hit 12 o'clock in front of me. Sure. And so when I push that and it turns and looks at me, if I turn and start walking, automatically that dog knows I can head up there. And then I use a whistle that tells them to move forward, or that's what I release them with at the start. Mm-hmm. And, those things. So they know that whistle means move on up there and hunt. So it becomes easy for me to change and say, okay, you felt the stimulation, you turned to look at me, and now I gave you another command through the visual line of communication that we're headed that way, and you can move to the front. And then pretty soon they just pick up that it means to check with me, but it doesn't necessarily mean to come all the way back in. And that'll just transfer as I hunt the dog in it, and it'll just adjust to those things. Got it. So I start with the basis of return to me, but then, of course, we reshape that as we move forward, and the dog learns more. Yeah. So ultimately, you're conditioning that dog to pay attention to you when he receives whatever the cue is. Yeah. Yep. And I get it, and it makes all the sense in the world. It's funny. I talk about cues in a different way. I talk about poker players have tells, and so do dogs. And if we know what the dog's tells are, we can use those to our advantage. Yeah. They're ready to take a command, or they're ready to learn something, whatever it is. That's fascinating. And you use the whole gamut. You have a repertoire on that collar, and I love to hear that, because I've just done that in the last 3 or 4 years. Give us an example of what you use some of the other things for, tone or beep, if you have a beep, or vibrate. They all have a use, don't they? Yeah. And not all collars, the reason I do all three is because different collars I have, like for instance, the Dogtras, when I'm using them, they have a vibrate.
Yeah.
The Garmins that I use have a tone, but they don't have a vibrate.
Yeah.
So, that's why I build all three. I like when they get comfortable with all of them, then I'll use any one I feel like I need.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of guys that I've trained dogs with, they have a different way or that I've trained for, they have a different way than I have, right? So being a horseback guy, I have my way of communicating with the dog out there, but a foot hunter, they might have a different way that they want to communicate. And so that's why I create all of them in that base. And then it's easy for somebody to say, well, I want to use vibrate to be return all the way to me. And I want to use my beep to mean look up and change direction, and so then it's easy for them to put those in the way that they want to use them,
Great. Well, we're just getting warmed up around here at the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. That's Talmage Smedly. We'll need to talk a little bit more horse afterwards. I need to get my fix of equine, whatever. We'll have a quick break here, and then we'll be back with more after this. So, Talmage, hang on. Everybody else, give me your rapt attention. That part of the program brought to you by HiVizSites.com, HiViz sites.com. You talk about changing behavior or influencing behavior. Well, mine has been influenced dramatically using these patented interlocking light pipes from HiViz Sites. I cannot tell you how much better I'm shooting now that my subconscious knows where the muzzle is as I'm looking at those chuckers flying away from me. It's a subtle thing, much like what we're discussing during the podcast today. Very, subtle signals that need to be processed in parallel, and that's the point. Watch the video at HiVizSites.com. You'll see what I mean. Literally, HiVizSites.com. Yeah, and I clean the HiViz site as well as the rest of my shotgun with products from sageandbreaker.com. Lots of new stuff coming down the pipeline. If you want first word on those, sign up for the mailing list. And then soon, I predict a sale. And you'll get notice before everybody else if you sign up at the mailing list. Sage and Breaker makes high-quality gun cleaning products and accessories, including cases and the things you need if you're traveling or storing your shotgun. Watch the videos. You'll learn something for sure about how to take better care of your shotgun. It's all at sageandbreaker.com. Yeehaw! Talmage Smedly on the other end of the line. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast, and I say that because I don't miss not having them, but I do miss having them. Of course, I was only, Talmage, the hay management coordinator at our stable. I got to fork it in and shovel it out after it was processed through the gut of a horse. What do you... tell us, just for fun, because some people don't know what this is all about. What's a reining horse doing and why?
The why is because we asked it to, and because they're just very kind to go along with us, I think. But a reining horse is, or reining, the event of reining is an event where it judges the rider's ability to communicate. It's a Western event that judges the rider's ability to communicate with their horse. When you show in a reining show, you're given a pattern, and in that pattern, you perform large, fast circles at high speed, and then you slow down and a little small, slow circle. You do that both ways, and you have lead changes where you change the lead of the horse or which foot is striking the farthest forward. And then you also do spins where the horse pivots on its back legs and spins around the back legs with its front legs, and sliding stops, which are probably the most exciting part of it, where you run at speed and say whoa to the horse, and the horse slides on its hind legs in the dirt. And I believe from my experience that the horses really do enjoy the event with the people and doing the things that we do with them. But yeah, so that's in a nutshell, that's what reining is. It shows the rider's ability to communicate with the horse. So I think it developed because, ranchers and cowboys would want to get together and compete and show off the things that they were able to do with their horse. And from that developed the event of reining.
And it is exciting. Been there, done that. One of the bigger challenges for the handler, if I could call it that, the rider, is staying on top.
Right.
Which I've experienced both ends of. But lots of fun and lots of insights there. You've talked a little bit about how subtle your signals, your cues can be when you're getting a horse to do any of those things, or simply, transitioning from a walk to a lope to a gallop to whatever.
Correct. Yeah.
With a dog on a leash, that might be the most parallel we can get to a horse with reins and a saddle and stirrups and boots and maybe some jingle bobs on the ends. What can we do with our leash and a collar that maybe we're doing too much of or not enough of?
I think for the most part, the leash and the collar, the check cord and the collar is used to restrain the dog, right? To keep the dog from leaving and to guide the dog to where we're trying to go. For us that are training bird dogs, you'll have a check cord and you might use that as a steering wheel to help guide the dog into the scent cone or to help, the dog learn to turn or the things that you're trying to teach the dog. But in general, what I see is a leash and a collar and the dog, that's just to restrain a dog. But a dog doesn't, believe it or not, doesn't love the tension on its neck. When we see people walk a dog down the street and it's dragging them and they say, well, it just likes to pull. If they were to drive a stake in the ground and hook that dog to that stake, it wouldn't be long before that dog was no longer pulling.
Yeah.
Right. It wouldn't just sit there and pull all day because that's what it enjoyed. It would back up and get closer to the pole so that the tension wasn't on its neck. But a dog can get the idea of that's how it signals its owner. And so if it wants to go on a walk around the block, it's got to drag this owner along with it. And so it believes that that's how it's going to move forward, is to lean into that collar and take that owner. And same thing moving to a bird, right? We check cord the dog into the bird, and the dog believes that if it leans into that collar, it can move up in that scent cone, or it can move forward to get to find the bird. And so we're restraining the dog in our mind, and in the dog's mind, it might be thinking it's taking you to the place that it wants to go. It's helping signal you to go there.
That is, number one, funny, and number two, way too common than it should be. So give me the opposite. So how do you train the dog? What you're saying is dog on a check cord moving into the scent cone has decided he's trained the human to come along with him as he tries to get closer and closer. How do we stop that?
Well, I think it starts when they're a little puppy in our video library. So, at T's Dog House, they'd be able to see that they could sign up for the video library. And then there's, I think we're up to around 200 videos that deal with just home stuff, and then also training the dogs out in the field. And when they're little puppies, we go through a course called Shaping the Mind. And that's where we teach them how to follow direction through our 3 lines of communication. These are the 3 principal ways that a dog gains information from humans to know the things that it needs to do. And that's through the physical, the visual, and the verbal. Mm-hmm. So the physical is the leash, and we teach them to get onto something from a cue through the leash, just guidance through the leash, and to get off of something through guidance of the leash, to move away from our body and then to come to us with guidance of the leash, and then to sit and lie down, all through guidance of the leash. So we can do all those things silently. And we teach that to the young puppy using luring. So, guiding them with our hand with the treat in it, but with the pressure of the leash, and then they move forward to get the treat, and they learn that that forward pressure. If they move forward, it releases and they're rewarded. All this just shapes the way the dog thinks about the leash. So to the dog, the leash is how it receives communication from the human. And then if we can get the human not to take the slack out of the leash all the time and keep tension there, then that dog will learn that when it's within the length of that leash, that the leash will be loose, and it'll learn to move with the human dictated by the length of the leash, but staying within the length of that leash so that the leash can be loose or even dragging on the ground, and it's just moving with the human. And then when there's pressure applied through the leash, the dog knows that that's a cue to move in a direction that then would release that pressure.
Okay.
And we create a loose leash walk, if you will.
Yeah.
And once we've created that with the puppy, then it's really more up to us to use a check cord or anything like that in a manner that complements that, or in that same manner, rather than then giving up and saying, well, we taught that to it, but now we're still going to just drag on into that check cord while he just, drives forward. Those that use like a pinch collar, those dogs, after they've used that pinch collar for a while, that same principle is taught where you watch those people that are good with a pinch collar and a check cord, and they can be very light in their signals with that dog, and they move together. That's not a dog dragging a human manner, but we can teach that to those puppies when they're very young. And then our walks around the block, or, walks through the store, or any of those things can be very, just with a loose leash and a dog moving comfortably along with us rather than out there dragging us and pulling us. And we have the ability to teach young puppies to load into the truck and load into the car, and to get on and off of things, and to sit and to lie down the places that we need them to sit and lie down. And it can all be done without even verbalization, just through light touch of our hands and the leash.
Yeah. Well, so what? Check me on this. What I'm hearing is if the dog is pulling and we don't want it to pull, we just don't go forward anymore.
Yep. And they will release that. Yeah, I mean, they'll pull for a minute, but then they'll turn around and come back like, what in the world's going on?
Yeah.
And if the other way to think of it, just like what you were saying, but another way that I'll explain it is, if the dog's pulling to try to get you to go forward, we just need to teach it to come back and get us to go forward, right? So Stop moving. When it pulls, stop moving. When it turns around and comes back to you, then you can start moving again. And pretty soon that dog will realize that pulling doesn't actually move you forward. It just stops your feet from moving, and that dog will start to listen to that leash differently.
Yep. The reason I originally called you is because you wrote a piece in Gun Dog Magazine that I thought was intriguing for a bunch of reasons. You talked about two kinds of, quote, punishment, unquote. And I don't know if you used that term strategically or what, but can you explain what you're talking about there?
Well, the scientific world of dog training has taken a bunch of, they've created a lot of definitions and words that they use that the common person just might not understand, and positive punishment is one of those. And that's often a brain twister for somebody, because they're like, positive punishment? Because we think of positive, generally the human, the group of humans, we think of positive as being good and negative as being bad. But when you talk in the scientific world of dogs and dog behavior, and also in the human behavior and things, they talk about positive and negative as in adding something or subtracting something. And so that can get real confusing for people when you're trying to just talk to them and help them with their communication with their dog, because they're hearing positive and punishment doesn't sound good, but positive in their mind was going to mean something good. And so, my purpose in the article is to help illustrate that dogs and humans both, and horses, like we talked about earlier, they're always trying to add things that they want and get rid of the things that they don't want.
Yeah.
Right. So if there's something that happens if there's something that happens and it changes my behavior to stop that thing from happening, then the scientific world would say, that's a negative punishment. He changed his behavior to make that thing go away or to remove something from his environment.
All right.
And if I did something to get something to happen, then they might say that was, a positive punishment. He changed his behavior to bring that into his environment. And so that's what they're talking about when they're saying positive, negative punishment. And, in the article, then I talked about two different forms of it to help people understand that even when we're talking about punishment, we're not necessarily talking about something bad. It might be something that is actually teaching the dog something that's going to save its life in the future, right? It's a good thing for the dog to learn. And it's 100% part of every living, breathing animal's world. Humans, dogs, horses, cats, everybody. The environment communicates to us when we do things that bring a result that we don't want. It changes our behavior. And when we do things that brings us the result we do want, it changes our behavior. And some of those things would be listed as punishment, even though they did actually help us live a better life. And so I think it's important. There's one of the challenges I run into in the dog world, especially when you're dealing with pets, is that though we've learned so much in the past years of how great positive reinforcement is, right? Or the helping the dog get the things it wants and changing and guiding its behavior according to that. And we might be using treats, or we use it naturally, to help them learn how to go find birds. And if they point them and hold them for us, we'll shoot them. Or if they stay within range of our gun and they flush them, we'll shoot them. And, depending on what style of dog and so hunt, we're using those things and seeing those things, but the dog world has talked a lot about what they would refer to as purely positive training.
Yes.
And it's created this idea in people's minds that maybe there's no reason for any adverse type of training, or that we're going to cleanse this dog's world of anything that might be undesirable. And that world doesn't exist. What we're doing is we're taking ourselves out of part of that communication, but the rest of the world that dog is dealing with is communicating that. The dog is always going to be using both sides of its mind. How do I get what I want, and how do I stop what I don't want, or how do I avoid what I don't want?
Yeah.
And if we take ourselves out of the picture on one end, we're not taking it out of the dog's life. All we're doing is removing ourselves from that part of communication, and which can lead to a lot of behavioral issues with dogs and a lot of anxiety in dogs and a lot of things in dogs because their world is no longer in balance. They don't understand. They're looking for information that has been held from it. And from an owner's or trainer's standpoint, it's like we've decided to run around and tie our left hand behind our back and only use our right, or vice versa, and why would we want to go through only understanding half of what's going on in that dog's world? Because it's going on in the dog's world, whether we're involved or not, all the time. The dog is always operating with both parts, but why would we want to take ourselves out of one side of it, or not come to understand what's going on in the dog's world in that side of it?
The word I want to use that you whichever side it belongs on, consequences are always a part of an action.
Correct.
And what you're saying is if we subscribe to the completely positive approach to training, there are no consequences ever.
Right.
Okay. Just want to make sure I got that squared away.
And the interesting thing to me about the purely positive, like I tell people all the time, the idea of purely positive, it's like a basketball player that tied its right hand behind his back and used his left hand. He got way better with his left hand, right? So when I look at them, if we would call it a movement, a purely positive movement, then I would say the benefit of that has been that we've dug deeper into how to use rewards, or how to use gains, right? Yeah. The dog gaining what it wants. How can we use that to shape behavior? And it's powerful and it's wonderful. And I'm thrilled that we've moved strongly that direction, because that has also helped us reduce how much we would need to use any kind of aversive type training, right? And so that's been a great that's been a great thing. But on the reverse side of that, then sometimes people get the idea that they don't have to also tell their dog. For instance, if a dog's chewing on a table leg, and we say, "Oh, here's a chew toy. Why don't you chew on the chew toy?" And we redirect the dog to the chew toy. That's a great way to help shape behavior. And that dog chews on the chew toy, and the dog's need for having something to chew on is being fulfilled, and our need of keeping our furniture nice is being fulfilled, and that's a great thing. But some dogs are going to leave that situation saying, well, it looks like I have a chair leg or a table leg to chew on and also a chew toy to chew on, right? And so somehow, if we're going to have a happy life with that dog and that dog's going to have a permanent place in our home, that dog needs to find out that the table leg, in fact, is not one of its options, right? So something has to happen for that dog to say, actually, I'm going to chew on the chew toy, but I'm never going to chew on the table leg, right? And so if we're trying to think in only positive and we say, yeah, but I will never say no to my dog, or I will never create negative markers for my dog or ways to tell my dog that I don't approve of something or that something's not okay, because I'm only going to, to redirect the dog to the good thing, then there are dogs that all of a sudden don't have a permanent home because the owner was unwilling to give that dog the rest of the communication that it needed. And then that's not fair to the dog, right? So, and that's not every dog, right? Some dogs might just be real easy and they're just like, oh, okay, I'll chew on the chew toy, and they stop chewing on the table leg. But other ones are going to need some help to understand that they're both not options.
Don't get me started on cats. They have trained my wife. and they've used the table leg analogy to great advantage. We're running a little low on time. I want to cover a couple things because these are hot topics with all of us. And just a concise suggestion in these areas based on what you're telling us and what we're learning. And thanks for keeping the collar really dialed down on me because I don't learn very quickly. Steadiness. We want a dog, define it however you want. We want a dog that stands still on a bird for a length of time. And so how in a nutshell, I know it's a lifetime of learning and all that, but what could we do better to encourage our dog to be more steady on more birds more often?
I think the biggest part of getting our dogs to behave on birds the way we want them to be steady and to stand that bird until we get there. I think that we focus too much on the dog standing still and not enough on the dog realizing that if it makes the bird fly, if it makes the bird fly instead of us making the bird fly, that the game ends.
Yeah.
Because then the dog makes the decisions to keep the bird on the ground. And there's different definitions of how a dog should behave on a bird, right? Some people, the second it gets sent, they want that dog to stand still and remain there until they come and release it to relocate, right? I come from a different school. I spend a lot of time on wild birds. A lot of the birds run. I want my dog, when he's standing on point and I get to him, I want those birds to be right where he's telling me they are, right out in front of him, right? So I want him to work those birds. And if that means he's moving with a running covey, or, the covey's moved on and he relocates and corrects and gets back into position where he can hold those birds. I've even had some of my favorite dogs that actually worked the bird. I'd watch them go up, leave their point and move to stop running birds and then to get them pinned down. And I've walked in on dogs that had the wind blowing up their tail wondering, how does this dog know that he's got this covey pinned in front of him if he can't smell him? Right. So there's more going on than just simply stopping when they smell the scent. Right. But actually working the bird. So I'm of the school that I want my dog, especially my young dogs, to feel very free to move their feet when they need to. But when the bird goes in the air, the game ends. The only way the game doesn't end when the bird goes in the air is if they've let me be the one
So,
put the bird in the air.
So if I take that from you, what it means is, if your dog isn't doing what you want when it comes to standing that bird, don't kill it.
Correct. Yeah, that would be the number one basic thing, is that if your dog put that bird in the air, don't kill it, that bird.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about helping take the chase away from the dog, where the dog no longer sees the value of the chase. All dogs do this anyway. If you just ran that dog and you shot every bird it pointed for you, and you didn't shoot any of the birds that didn't point, eventually that dog's going to say, bag chasing, I'm going to point it so that he'll shoot it, because chasing is not working to get me the bird like if he shoots it. Right. And so the dog's going to naturally, over the course of years, figure that out if we just ran on that one rule that you just gave.
Yeah.
But we can do things to help speed that up, I think, by creating ways to stop, or to stop that dog from chasing, so that it realizes, I put those birds up and my fun ended, and shifting the balance so the dog thinks the greatest experience it can have out there in the field is pointing the bird. And then some of the dogs also, of course, love retrieving the bird, but they love pointing a bird. And if I can shift that balance so they love pointing a bird far more than they love chasing the bird, then I'm going to have a dog that gets pretty steady just on that basic principle. Okay,
the next one is retrieving. Almost everybody who writes me a note of some sort wants to have a better retriever. I don't care what the breed is. They want that dog to do the hard work, because we don't want to go all the way down that hill and climb all the way back up. What is one thing within your kind of overall philosophy that will help your dog come back to you, all the way back to you, more often?
The enjoyment the dog gets from the experience with us. I think we can learn a lot. For instance, the world of protection dogs, police dogs. Mm-hmm. That world, they work on the hold training, and they work on that dog retrieving things to them, and they like to use toys as part of the reward for their scent detection. Right. And so that's a big thing, but they really create a game out of it. It's I give it to you, you give it back to me. They play tug with it. They teach out. They do all these things where there's so much interaction between the dog and the human that the dog gets to where it'll pick something up and just come beg the human to interact with them, to create the game again. And I think if we spent, in a general rule, I think if we spent more time with our puppies playing and playing things that, you bring it to me, I'll toss it again for you, I'm going to hand it back to you. Yeah. You can run around with it and follow me around with it to give it to me again. Even a little bit of tug. Yeah. We definitely don't want a tug of war when they bring us the bird, but we want them to think that it's fun to give it to us and take it away from us, and give it to us and take it away from us. And if we build that in a young puppy, then we have something to mold as the dog gets older into a nice retrieve. And we would avoid the force fetch is something that everybody just wants to turn to quickly. But it's really hard to make a dog do something it has no desire to do and then have the dog do it really well.
Absolutely.
Like somewhere in there, that dog has to find a joy in doing what you want it to do. And so I think we lean on that force fetch by, we can just make that happen. But I can avoid force fetch altogether if I've trained retrieve, if I've trained, the dog taking something out of my hand and then bringing it and giving it back to me, and I can put it on the ground and say fetch, and it goes and picks it up and brings it back to me. And if I've created that in a game, then I can avoid a need to force fetch. And if I found a need to do a forced retrieve for some reason, because in my competition, I want to make sure the dog doesn't set the bird down to shake off the water and then pick the bird back up, right? Yeah, or I need that dog to deliver and hold the thing all the way to heel and present it to me in a certain way. So there's reasons that people would say, I do want to teach the dog to turn off pressure by getting this item in its mouth, right? Which is essentially what a force fetch is. But if I've already taught the dog to love to take something out of my hand, to love to hold something for me, and I've done all that in fun, then now I've created a dog that's going to go through the force fetching process very quickly, because it already wants to do the things we're going to ask it to do. And we can do it way less adversely, where we don't have to use any kind of high levels of pressure, but rather we're just using a signal now to get the dog to do the things that we've already taught it out of fun. Now we can just teach it, well, if you feel this little stimulation on the neck, or if you feel me, if I pick up your ear, that means go get that thing in your mouth. And the thing that we've learned with the e-collar, just with the recall, like we talked about earlier in the program, if we've created the idea that to do the thing is rewarding and wonderful, like coming back to me, then when I use higher levels of stimulation, which I certainly might need to do, in case of a deer chase, or in case of, where the dog has a real strong desire to go one place and I need him to come to me. I don't need him to chase the car. I need him to come to me. Then we certainly might turn up that e-collar to send a stronger message. But the dog's mind knows that if it does turn and come to me, that it's coming to a party, right? And the same thing happens with the retrieve. If we've already taught it to love the game, we've already taught it to take the items out of our hand or to go pick it up off the ground and bring it back to us, and that this is rewarding and fun. And then we, with low levels of communication, with signals, we teach it to do it with those physical signals. Then with enough repetitions, then that dog, as those signals get stronger and stronger, that dog's going to go stronger and stronger to do the things that we've taught it to do. We avoid I think we can avoid how much adverse pressure we need to put on the dog, and decrease the amount the dog needs to feel. And when we do need to put that on, I think we send a stronger message and we avoid having to do it more often. Does that make sense? Instead of being in a situation where we create a lot of hard pressure to drive it to the dummy until it gets the idea, instead we already taught it the idea without adversive pressure. And now all it has to learn is just the idea that if it doesn't, it might get stronger, and that can be a quick lesson that's learned, and we move on and everybody's happy, and we're just so much better results if we've created games out of the things we want the dogs to do before we ever used any kind of communication that might be more adversive in any way.
Yeah, you just summed it up right there, and this is this is a way of looking at it that most hardcore trainers may not know yet or have thought about, and that is, there's nothing wrong with making a game out of this, especially a game where the dog understands the positive aspects of what I'll call obedience. I joke about it all the time. I wrote about it in a book way back. Why would a dog bring something back to you if the first thing that happens when he gets there is you take it away and put it in your vest? Right. Yeah. Okay, just think about that once in a while and you get it. Yeah, Talmage, you said it way more eloquently than me, but the basic idea is right there, and it works. Man, we could be talking the rest of the day, but you probably got horses to feed or dogs to train or all of the above and more. So I'm going to turn you loose. Talmage Smedly, T's Doghouse is the name of his organization. tsdoghouse.com is the easiest way to find that. Trainer, breeder, bird hunter. We hardly talk bird hunting except for your duck story, but we'll do that on the next one. In the meanwhile, I've learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else has as well. Thanks so much for being part of the Upland Nation podcast.
You bet. I had a great time. Thanks for having me on.
Take care now. And we've still got, speaking of this kind of thing, I've just, I had a flash. It's come from probably the last 4 hunting trips I've made that might just help save your dog's life. Nothing earth-shattering, but I'll just get it off my chest in just a moment in the Handle It segment. But first, we're brought to you in part by TrulockChokes.com. State-of-the-art CNC equipment. American steel, produced in an American factory right there in Wiggum, Georgia. TrulockChokes.com. TruLock. TrulockChokes.com. Lifetime warranty, satisfaction guarantee. in large part because of all of those things, plus a second-to-none quality control program. Take a look at their website. Find chokes that will work for you. It might be the simplest way to add a bird to your bag every once in a while. A more consistent pattern, better shooting, more birds on the ground. TrulockChokes.com. And Purina, boy, I'm so excited about our talk. Purina Pro Plan Sport dog food. Formulas are available for all stages of your hunting dog's life. If you're looking for a puppy formula, they've got it. For problem-solving, trainability, a senior-specific formula, all available. Take a look at all your choices at ProPlansport.com. There's a reason Pro Plan Sport fuels the most sporting dog champions. Yeah, so as Tom Waits would say, let me pull on your coat for a minute here in our Handle It segment. If I get it off my chest now, then I won't have to write it in some magazine article and make people mad. But would you do me a favor? But more importantly, do your dog a favor and do everybody else you're hunting with and their dogs a favor too. Steal, buy, make, or borrow more leashes. Yes, if you think about the perfect bird hunt, it starts and ends with a dog that is under control at all times. Yeah, you don't just open the truck tailgate and turn the dog loose to pee on the tires and then go hump the other dog or whatever, let alone run off and cross a state highway, or get in a fight with the other intact male, or steal somebody's steak off the barbecue grill. All those things won't happen if your dog is on a leash. Yeah, and there are variations. If you don't have a crate for your dog or a stake to stake him out on, all those ways your dog is totally in control and out of trouble. The safest being a crate. A leash is next. A tie-out stake, as long as everybody else's dogs are controlled as well. So please, do me a favor. Make more friends and fewer enemies. Keep your dog in control at the beginning, at the end of the hunt. In the middle, it's probably more important to learn how to shoot better. Oh, wait, that's my line. Thank you for putting up with my rant. That's the Handle It segment today, brought to you by MidvalleyClays.com. Yeah, if you're looking for a sub-gauge gun, and I talk a lot about them, I'm a big believer. Call Dave Fiedler at MidvalleyClays.com. He can guide you through the process. What gauge? For what uses? How far away are most of the birds? You shooting with a flushing dog or a pointing dog? Or maybe both in my case. Same dog. Dave's got thoughts on that because he's a bird hunter, a shooting instructor, and a shotgun guru. Learn more. Start your shotgun search at MidvalleyClays.com. Whew. Yeah, I got to digest all that information from Talmage Smedly. Thank you so much, Talmage, for being part of the Upland Nation podcast. If you too want to learn more about what he's doing, go to tsdoghouse.com, tsdoghouse.com. Yeah, or come back here. We'll do it again very soon. Thank you if you've made a review on your website, whether it's Apple Podcasts or anywhere else. Wherever you get your podcast, please leave a review. Sure appreciate that. And appreciate the support of all of our sponsors. SageandBreaker.com, Purina Pro Plan Sport, dog food, MidvalleyClays.com, TrulockChokes.com, MidwayUSA.com, pointer shotguns, and HiViz shooting systems. We're talking every day at the social media sites. I'm asking questions, you're giving answers, and vice versa. Hope to talk with you there and hope to run into you in the field very soon. Have a great season. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening to the Upland Nation Podcasts.